A new friend on the Skarloey Railway. Summer is always busy on Sodor, and the engines don't mind the extra work. This puts a strain on them, and that's when new engines are brought to help out. Later, Mr. Percival came to see both engines. I understand you both have been struggling occasionally with your trains. So how should we settle this? He asked. How about another engine here to help us? Added Sir Handel. I'll think about it, replied Mr. Percival. He came back minutes later. Of course, let's have another engine to help you guys. I will help with the recovery team while the other engines do their usual work, he said. Whoever it is, you will make him or her feel welcome, said Mr. Percival as he left. Jock was taking the recovery team down the line. Let's explore any abandoned area on the old Mid-Sodor, said one of the workers. The explorers split up in all sorts of directions. They found the back of the old mining shed, which was covered in rocks. Hello, what's your name? Asked Mr. Percival after he pulled away two of them. Name's Stanley, he said quietly. Are you sad? asked Mr. Percival. Stupid manager took away my wheels and turned me into a pumping engine, and I've heard that he's been dead for a while because of Albert running his train off the tracks, and now I feel silly for what I did, and I want to be really useful, he said. Where's Smudger? He works on my railway. If you want another chance, that's what you'll get, said Mr. Percival. After the other rescuers came, Stanley was put onto an off-road truck and driven away from where he was found. They saw the off-road truck with Stanley on its flatbed come. Let's load him up, said Mr. Percival, and that is what they did. Jock puffed carefully in reverse back to Arlesdale Station. Percy shunted Stanley into the works. Don't worry, he said. You will find yourself really useful. Stanley looked down at himself in shame. After Stanley was turned back into an engine, this time Georgie came to pick him up. I'm sure you won't derail this time around, she said sweetly, although she was anxious deep down. When they got to the transfer yards, Stanley was lifted onto the narrow-gauge rails by a crane. After Stanley said thank you to Georgie, she left. Then his fire was burning nicely, and Stanley had a good head of steam. Sir Handel and Smudger were the first to meet Stanley, the new engine. Ugh, you came back? Said Sir Handel. Oh, my old friend. Glad to see you back, puffed Smudger. You and Stanley were friends? Said Sir Handel. Yes, me and him go back to our time on the good old Mid-Sodor Railway, puffed Stanley. Later, Mr. Percival came to see Stanley. I want you to take some straw to the transfer yards, he said. Ah, yes, work to do, Stanley puffed. For the rest of the day, Stanley worked hard. On the way to the transfer yards, he didn't derail. "That's the hay I was told to collect here," said Gillen. "Who are you?" he asked. "The name's Stanley. I'm the new engine for the Skarloey Railway," he said. Luke was another engine to meet Stanley. "Hello," he said. "Hi there," Stanley replied. "So, you were once bad, but have since changed your ways?" said Luke. "Yes," puffed Stanley, "just like that 87546 filler," he said. "How do you know about him?" Luke asked curiously. "Percy told me about him on my way to the works," Stanley replied. Stanley shunted the slate cars at the inclined railway. After they went up, he went off to find work to do. Meanwhile, Luke continued down the line with his train when suddenly... "Help!" he screamed as he was dangling on the cliff. Stanley's driver ran up to Stanley and Duncan. "Luke is off the line! One of you, go help him!" he said. "Are you kidding me? I'm not rescuing that stupid fat boiler," said Duncan. "Hang on, I'm coming," said Stanley as he left. Luke looked down in panic at the bottom of the cliff. "If I roll over, tell Mr. Percival that I loved working on the railway," he said. "Oh, you'll get out of this somehow," said Luke's driver. Just then, Stanley puffed in. "Oh, I'm here. Everything will be okay," he puffed. "Oh, good," puffed Luke. "I'm glad it's you and not that grouchy Duncan who will help me," he added. Then, Stanley was coupled up to Luke's coaches, and he began to pull. With every wheel turn, he pulled Luke back onto firm rails. "Thank you," puffed Luke. "You're always welcome," puffed Stanley. Then, Luke's driver came out. "There's bad weather ahead. Luke's passengers are waiting, and his tubes are ruptured," he said. "Stanley, do you think you can?" he asked. "I'll try as a way to be helpful," said Stanley. "That's a good engine," Luke replied. Stanley pushed the train down the line. The wind was howling like that in a storm, but Stanley kept trying nonetheless. The train charged at the wind with much ferocity. "We must pull together, just like in the States," Stanley puffed. Despite their struggles, they made it to the station at last. "Well, Stanley, you weren't the same engine you were on the MSR," said Sir Handel. "I was surprised to find out you did change your ways. And another thing, I'm sorry I sounded judgmental," said Sir Handel. "You're all right," puffed Stanley. Later, Mr. Percival came to see Stanley. As a reward for your bravery, I think you should take the next puppet show special," he said. "Thank you," puffed Stanley. "Also, would you like to join my railway? Mr. Percival added. Oh, yes, Stanley puffed. Stanley is now good friends with the other engines, and, like Smudger, has since learned his lesson. And he is always happy to help those in need. I think he wants to make new friends, don't you?